welcome to the 905 podcast with me, Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And we're coming back after a short break last week that we're about to discuss with our usual roundup, but a roundup on a Tuesday rather than a Thursday this week of news in the 905. And well, let's kick off, Joel, with Canada Day and the things surrounding that.
Well, yeah, this Canada Day I think had a different feel to it than previous years. For hopefully people would understand for obvious reasons. This Canada Day, the shadow of the discoveries of now coming up over 1,000 unmarked graves for children at various residential school sites in this country has kind of given a lot of people to take pause and to reevaluate a bit of what it means to be Canadian going forward, I guess, in this country is the polite way I guess I'll phrase it. Everyone, it seems, except for conservative politicians. Canada Day, I noticed a trend on social media with the majority of progressive NDP, Green, and Liberal MPs and MPPs all posting messages of, that we have a lot to be happy for, but clearly we need to take pause and reflect and look a little bit more inwards in terms of who we want to be as a people going forward from this point. And I thought those messages were pretty apt for capturing kind of the mood in the country at the moment. But then I looked at all the conservative MPPs and MPs in the region that were tweeting out, and it was just your same jingoistic messages of pro-Canada, rah, 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 we've done nothing wrong, we're the greatest country in the world. And normally I guess that would be suitable, but I found it to be a little bit hollow this year. I thought it was painful. It was painfully that they were obviously trying to avoid talking about the elephant in the room, which was residential schools in this country. It was one of those things of, what you didn't say was a lot louder than what you did say, and it was telling. I mean, everyone from Jane McKenna here in Burlington all the way up to Aaron O'Toole, all posting, hey, great, and the only recognition I saw in them that was towards First Nations of this land was, hey, thanks for giving us the name Canada. Which, not the message you want to strike when we're exhuming unmarked graves of children across this country. Like, it was just, guys, read the room,
Mm-hmm. It's, we were coming up to Canada Day and it fell on a Thursday, which is our usual day to do an episode, and it was let's put it this way. I'm not going to blame anybody for not wanting to say, we're cancelling Canada Day this year. If you want to, it's everybody feels differently, but you don't feel differently about those dead bodies in graveyards. They can defend the right to celebrate Canada Day on Canada Day all they want. That's a legitimate point of view. I think most people just felt it was a good year to take a step back and treat us slightly differently. I mean, not even slightly different, very differently, for very good reasons. Whatever, they can do their thing. But that doesn't mean that you just pretend that those bodies don't exist on this day. Or if you're acknowledging Canada, then you're acknowledging the totality of Canada before and after Europeans came here. So it's like, of all the days in the year when maybe a land acknowledgement would be nice, Canada Day is probably it. It's so deliberately tone deaf. And I mean, I was just saying to you before we came on, and I might as well say it here as well. I was over at family last night and was shown an email that was, it's being sent around amongst the 70-year-old citizens of Burlington. And you can kind of imagine what these emails are like. And that's fine. People in their 70s will have their opinions, and they are going to be very resistant to changing opinions that they've had for a very long time. And that's just human nature. I get that. Even if it is spectacularly bloody ignorant. However, the Conservative Party of Canada doesn't need to pander to that stuff, but it does because that's their core voter. You know, they know if someone had said anything about the First Nations in a tweet, then all the 70-year-olds are going to see that and they're going to be pissed. Well, maybe they should be challenging those 70-year-olds to be a little bit more open-minded rather than just going along with it. You know, and it's really like that guy in London, right? You know, with his... and good for him, him saying, you know, when I was canvassing, I just ran into so many racists.
Right.
Good for him. Shame he didn't say it at the time, but good for him. But it's that same process. They know what they're dealing with, and they don't want to challenge it, even though they know it's wrong.
Well, that's the crux of it, is that, you know, this is a monumental moment in our country's history. There's going to be a lot of inward reflection and I'm hoping a lot of rethinking of what steps forward we want to take next. And what just struck me was the sheer fact, like, it was just let's just deny it happened. You know, like let's not acknowledge it. Let's not acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of people, those of First Nations, who are very much hurting, who are very much reliving traumas of the past in some cases, and there are people who are white Canadians who are waking up to a harsh reality of their country, and they're not comfortable with it. They're trying to confront it as well, and everybody's kind of in this collective atmosphere of trauma, and we're trying to work through it. We realize, okay, we can't deny this. We have to address this illness that is part of ourselves, part of this country, and we need to figure out a way to do it. We know it's not going to be pretty. We know it's not going to be easy, but we need to do it. And instead, the conservative politicians of all levels in this country seemingly decided, no, we're just going to deny it. If we put our heads in the sand and we ignore it, it didn't happen, and we can continue with the way things always are. And that was, it was one of those things I just couldn't let it slide. It's not a difference of opinion. It's a matter of, you know what, you're a leader. This is your opportunity to stand up and lead, to really take charge of the conversation and say, yeah, this is we need to address this. We don't know. I don't think it makes you any less of a person to say, this is a harsh thing. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we acknowledge that it happened. We acknowledge that the Canadian government did this. Are we, I'm not asking any current leader to take blame. I'm not asking anyone to fall on the sword and plead, oh my gosh, I'm responsible. No, but you have to accept that it happened, and you have to accept that we need to figure out a way to go forward together. First Nations and settlers together moving forward. What that path will take, I have no idea. I don't think it's going to be an easy one. I don't think it's going to be a case of throwing money at this issue. This is going to be to fix this problem and to address it and to find real reconciliation, forgiveness. It's going to take structural change and real leadership. And this Canada Day, Conservatives show that they'd rather stick their head in the sand than face up to the challenges of the day.
It comes back to that phrase that Carl Dogstad used the first time and the second time they were on the podcast, of nation-to-nation conversation. Yeah, it's not about... the traditional Canadian way of dealing with problems is to write a check and then to sometimes try and not let them cash the check, you know. Right. So, yeah, we'll give you pipelines of water, but, you know, you may have to wait 20 years. Or with the, you know, the current debate that's happening literally as the bodies are being dug up, of the federal government trying to avoid paying court-ordered fines, basically, for trying to get out of paying for the health care of First Nations children for decades. You know, this is today's Liberal government that is saying all these wonderful things about reconciliation, still fighting in court to not pay for people. I
think we should emphasize this isn't just about bashing Conservatives.
No.
You know, Justin Trudeau came out and was all about, we need to find reconciliation and path forward, and that's the right thing to say. His actions to date, though, have been woefully inadequate, and every Liberal, whether you're a backbencher or in cabinet, needs to accept that your actions to date on this file have been woefully inadequate and woefully lacking, and quite frankly, it's disgraceful to be toting the path forward of reconciliation, yet we still have Indigenous communities without drinking underboil water advisories. We're desperate to try and push pipelines through their lands, but we can't give them drinking water in their own homes. That's disgraceful. And it's something that Justin Trudeau and the current Liberal government, regardless, there's no excuse. But at this point, we're at year 9.
Yeah, there's no excuse after year.
There's no excuse.
2.
You should be ashamed of yourselves, each and every one of them.
This is one of the few things that the federal government has that is solely its responsibility. Well, not entirely solely, but largely solely its responsibility. This is a federal thing. If people are still not getting drinking water, if children are still committing suicide at horrific rates, this is down to them. And yeah, I mean, it's that there needs to be a complete fundamental change in the way that Canada relates to the Indigenous people who were here first. And it needs to be on that basis that these are still people who are, whether they call themselves also Canadian or whatever, are had a country imposed on them from the top and did not ask for it to come here, and who have established treaty rights that we recognize in our laws that set them apart. And we have to treat them that way. The whole problem with the Indian Act was that it took these people who have the separate status and then said we're going to treat them like sort of problem children and surround them with conditions that means ultimately it's impossible for them to exist. And we're still doing that. The Indian Act is still on the statute books. I mean, sure, it's been revised and changed and whatever.
Well, what we need to do is we need to start honoring the treaties, finally. 300 years after they were written in some cases, 400 perhaps in some cases, but we need to start honoring the treaties properly in the spirit of the treaties of sharing the land. How that works, I don't know, but tough. Like that's I'm not dealing with the old conservatives, and I'm saying conservative is a small c here. Conservative excuse of, oh well, it's going to cost us money. Everything's going to cost us money. It's time we start investing in people in this country as opposed to worrying about how much it's going to cost to make a buck. On that note, what else do we got to talk about today, Roland?
Well, the world's also catching on fire environmentally.
Boy.
Or BC is. Well, BC is definitely not in the 905. But the Chedoke Creek definitely is in the 905. And, you picked up on a story on that. So why don't you kick off on that one as well?
Matthew Van Dongen of the Hamilton Spectator posted or wrote a story this weekend. Basically, as listeners of the podcast remember, and I'm sure if you lived in the area of the 905, you're aware of, for years, the city of Hamilton covered up the news that raw sewage was pumping into the Chedoke Creek and now it entered into Coote's Paradise. They finally discovered, oh, hey, we left the switch on and then turned off the switch, not before billions of liters of raw sewage dumped into this wetland. So the city asked, well, how much is it going to cost to clean up? And it's estimating $150 million to clean up the area. And that's not including other issues of the environment, that including to upgrade the pipes and the infrastructure leading into the area so that we don't have this leak again. There's other runoff of just urban development that can spill, like chemicals and whatnot, that can spill into the watershed. Basically, the city of Hamilton shied away from doing the necessary infrastructure maintenance, the unsexy part of municipal governance, which is just making sure the pipes don't rust through and that the water flows easily. The city didn't do this, and now the bill has come due. So either we ignore it and we risk having more raw sewage pumped, at some point down the road, spew into this wetland, or we spend $150 million now, possibly more, to actually do this properly. This is just a case of, this is the plight of, I'm not going to just focus on Hamilton in this one. This is the kind of plight of all municipalities in the 21st century, is that all this pipework that we laid down 100 years ago or 50 years ago or 70, however long, the maintenance bill has come due.
Yeah. I mean, it's... Well, the time for change was probably 20 years ago, but given that we didn't do anything 20 years ago, the time for change is now. If you look around the 905, what we have done to it since we came here, far too often, it's not something we can feel very proud of. The types of urban development, the sprawl, the domination of car culture, and then industrialization. The kind of the history of Hamilton is of huge environmental calamities brought about by industry. And cleaning, I mean, the federal government has been paying to clean up the Randall Reef in recent years, which is great. They're cleaning it up at last, but boy, was it a mess, and again, it almost ties back to the First Nations thing and the kind of concepts of environmental stewardship that the First Nations had as kind of pre-industrial societies. That we kind of need to get back to. I mean, and we're not talking about going back to horses and buggies or anything here. We're talking about doing things which are sustainable and efficient and clean, because it's actually going to be a hell of a lot better for us in the long run. Because it's nice.
We're seeing this isn't a pipe dream. This isn't no pun intended. This isn't a hippy dippy tree hugging and stuff. We've seen what happened out west. Like the news this week was a town literally erupted into flames just because it was so hot in British Columbia, and we act like, oh, that's just a freak accident. Like, that's not going to be a freak accident. That's going to happen more and more as temperatures begin to rise due to climate change. This isn't a one-off story, people. That will happen time and time again across this country, because we didn't build our cities or the places we live to live in a hot climate environment. This is supposed to be a cold, moderately warm climate, and our actions have been heating this planet up to the point where we now have towns in BC erupting into flames from the heat. This is this is shocking to me. And I know people say, well, we live in the 905. Why should we care? Because the 905 didn't exist until recently. Like the 905 is an arbitrary border that we put upon ourselves. Mm-hmm. We need to protect our wetlands. That's what they do, is they help moderate our temperature. And something that we've talked about numerous times on this podcast. We had Conservation Halton on to talk about the need to preserve wetlands and waterways in Ontario in the 905. This stuff's all connected, people. It's not we can't just say, oh well, we got to build a highway, we got to build we got to build this new subdivision because somebody's got to make a profit. No, we don't anymore. We need to come up with better ways to live and better ways to use the land that we're on. Otherwise, we're going to start seeing that that heat dome that was in BC. It's going to just move west. We're going to have heat domes pop up in various parts around the country. We're having a heat wave come our way actually today and tomorrow, and hopefully the rain comes and breaks it, but that might not happen.
Well, and I think likely the bigger problem in our region is going to be flooding.
Yep.
That we've paved so much of the land that is meant to sort of absorb the water, and remember, Burlington had one major rainfall event, and that cost millions and millions and millions of dollars to clean up. People are still recovering from that. That was just 1 2-hour storm. Imagine a world where we have one of those every year. Or, basically, at that point, if you have one every year, you have homes that are no longer insurable. You have parts of your town that can no longer be kind of lived in because they're going to be persistently flooded.
And to want to bring it home personally is that if you happen to live in one of those neighborhoods, you won't be able to sell. Nobody's going to want to buy your home. Mm-hmm. You can't just say, okay, well, I'll just sell my home for maybe a break even and take off. Nobody's going to buy your home if it's an uninsurable, or it's going to cost more to insure it than the cost to buy it. The problems down the road are just so intertwined and so complex, and it's such a mess that we can avoid it now if we take action. Well, we should have taken action 10 years ago, but we were too busy with wanting progress.
It's persuading people that this is in their own interest, and this is the problem, that when people, it's human nature not to look beyond the end of our own noses. So you go to the gas station, and it's like, hey, gas is 10 cents more than it used to be. Ouch, that hurts. And it's like, yeah, everybody would prefer things are cheap, but to be honest, gas is pretty darn cheap here compared with the rest of the world, well, many parts of the world. So, A, think yourself lucky. B, better to pay that than the alternative, which is going to be a hell of a much higher price that we're going to be dealing with.
What bothers me about all this is that we talk like, oh, what can you do? What can we do? And it's, no, the technology is here. We can do this. We can build better homes, more ecologically sustainable homes. We can drive better cars without having to pump out barrels upon barrels of oil out of the ground for a profit margin that I don't care about anymore. We can. The technology is here. The problem that I see blocking the transition to these technologies is twofold. One is lack of government will to actually enforce this change. And I'm talking like changing building codes to make it mandatory that, all roofs must have solar panels on them. Just make it happen. You don't have to worry about what people might like. Too bad. If you want to build a house or a condo building or whatever, on the roof must have solar or in some cases wind power. But that's just it. To more and using less. We can talk about recycling material. We can build buildings out of recycled materials now a lot easier. It's a matter of changing the building codes to say, okay, these are safe. And I know in Texas they're doing it. They have where you can take concrete and recycled materials, repurpose it into basically a sludge, and you 3D print a house. We don't do that because, oh my gosh, what about the carpenters union and all the people who cut down trees to make wood? We have to have wood for houses. And the thing is, I don't think we do anymore. The technology is developing that we don't necessarily need as much wood or the old forms of manufacturing to make our homes and our buildings anymore. We can do this. So it's that political. Second, it's the economic incentives of too many people that's how they make their money, and it's not in there's no incentive for them to actually change their business model. No, we'll give them tax subsidies to keep making ecologically harmful or inefficient products because we just, we can't be bothered to buy new equipment. We can't be bothered to automate. We can't be bothered to find new materials, cheaper materials, more environmentally friendly materials. We can't be bothered with that. Just give us a tax subsidy because, we need to preserve Canadian jobs. And the government says, okay, and they hand off a check to these out-of-date companies, and instead what we should be doing is saying, no, we're changing the rules. So these new companies that have a new, better idea, what we call capitalism, they have a better idea and a cheaper way of doing it, they get a shot now.
It's actually a challenge for the NDP. It's always interesting that when someone jumps from the Green Party to another party, they tend to jump to the Liberals because they perceive the Liberals as being greener than the NDP, and that's, I guess, because of those. Not that the Liberals don't have all kinds of associations with unions, but the NDP have more, and the unions tend to act as a brake against change because it threatens jobs. And it's something that the unions really need to address, that it's not in their members' best interest to be continuing in modes of work that are environmentally indefensible.
On that note, Roland, it should be noted that unions hated the onset of the automobile. When companies realized, hey, I can put my stuff on a truck and it can go a lot farther on a truck than it can with a horse-drawn buggy and carriage, unions oppose that. Unions thought, oh no, that's going to take away jobs. We're going to stop the encroachment of the truck, the internal combustion engine onto our workforce. And you know what? How many goods are brought to a store by a horse-drawn buggy and cart nowadays? None, because you can't stop progress. So stop trying to delay what is needed with new technologies, more efficient materials, better automation. Get out of the way so we can get on with saving the planet.
Yeah. I mean, it's unions also opposed women in the workplace for the same reason. They didn't want them taking jobs from men.
Right.
I'm not saying all unions. Many unions. It's an established fact that happened. And I'm not being anti-union here, but they have to change just like all of us have to change. And yes. The NDP needs to be putting pressure on that so that they can become a Green Party. I'm a fairly left-wing guy. I mean, people have probably noticed by now. But I was never I didn't join the NDP kind of for that reason, because I initially got involved in politics when I started volunteering. It was after the Green Shift, Stephen Dion's Green Shift. That's what brought me into politics. It was like, wow, here's a leader. And I didn't join until he'd actually lost. But anyway, here's a leader who's putting the whole green issue front and center on his platform. When he lost, it's like, oh, bugger this. I'm going to get involved and see what I'm going to change the world. Now, yeah, that was 10 years ago at least, wasn't it? More. And how much further have we come? But yeah, I mean, it's past due. And every party we need a consensus on this, which is what places like New Zealand have. They have a cross-party consensus. And we don't have a consensus on anything right now.
What has been said is that I'll give Aaron O'Toole a lot of credit on this. I think if you manage to get that policy passed at his party's convention, can you imagine if all the major parties agreed that climate change was a national issue? Maybe the Conservatives would come in with, okay, we're going to have less tax on this, more funding for that. We could have had what I would have liked to have seen is a myriad of options and maybe work towards a common plan that the government could put forward. Instead, it's clear there's a big chunk of that party's supporters that they view climate change as it's a hoax. They, you and I are just hippy dippy, snowflake liberal tree huggers, and we have our heads in the sand. We don't realize the reality. And here's the reality: nobody wants oil anymore. Oil prices are crashing hard across the country. Nobody wants to pump anymore. We're not going to build any pipelines. That's just a given. This country will never build pipelines. Not going to happen, no matter who's in power. But that's not the catastrophe that the Conservatives want us to believe. We have an opportunity. The technology is there to revamp our economy, revamp our lifestyles into a more progressive and a sustainable model. Just get out of the way. It'll be okay.
Well, and the countries that are at the forefront of this, and ironically, China is coming from a very kind of dirty starting point. One of the countries that's most open to the radical changes that are needed. They're going to be the countries that succeed over the next century, because defending stuff that is inefficient. And this is, I wish the parties would get this, that it's not about hugging trees. No. It's not about being nice for the sake of being nice. It's about doing the right thing because it's the selfish thing to do. Conservatives are about efficiency. Well, that's what they used to say they were about. If you're about efficiency, you should be in favor of every damn green thing that comes along because they're more efficient.
Generating electricity is relatively cheap. It's like the wind blows, the sun shines. That's it. It doesn't cost anything to do that. You build a windmill, and windmills are getting, like, the technology is getting more efficient. It's not, we got to get over this stuck with fields of windmills. Like, we'll get better technology. That's what capitalism does. Is it generates better technology. And we have to protect our waterways better. We have to, all of it. And it has to be done. It had to be done yesterday. Not. We shouldn't be debating this. We need to start electing politicians, whether they're conservative or progressive or whomever. We need to elect people who say, I've got a plan for this. I have an idea. I think this will work, and base it in the science and in the reality, and say, yeah, maybe this will work.
Well, that's one more story in the 905 that I think we should mention. And we've already talked about First Nations and Canada Day, But coincidentally, I don't know if it was on Canada Day or the day after, the developer of the contested lands at the Six Nations Reserve outside Caledonia announced that they were completely withdrawing from the lands. Well, they still own the lands, but they were withdrawing any plans to develop it. So in effect, for the foreseeable future, the First Nations protesters have won, and they were celebrating that yesterday with events at that field. I think this is a good thing. I think the developer was crazy to see the history of that neighborhood and think they could do that anyway. But
it's one of those things, like when we had Carl and Sean from One Dish One Mic on to talk about this a while back. I remember one of the first questions I asked them was, the site across literally on the other side of the road from 1492 Landback Lane, on the other side of the road, was contested a little while back when Dalton McGuinty was premier. That's how long ago we were. But it was contested then. And I said, my thought was always, okay, if that plot of land is contested, okay, I want to develop a development or whatever, I'm just going to go across the street. Like, why wouldn't your first reaction have been, I'm just going to go to the Six Nations and say, can we, is this contested? And the thing is, what got me about this was the story just goes so much to the colonial mindset of how we view the First Nations people, because they went to the elected band council, and clearly from what we've learned, there's the discrepancy between the elected band council and the hereditary band council, and that's a point that I'm not clear on, but it's clearly a point of contention for the Mohawk and the First Nation Haudenosaunee people of the land. As the developer, like, it's one of those things, like, you can either try and cheat your way out, say, well, I talked to these people and they said it was okay, but the lesson I think going forward should be real and meaningful consultation with First Nations people. Don't try and cheat your way out of it. Don't try and find, I just need somebody to sign off over the land, but to actually go to the whole band council and go to the whole band and say, we want to partner with you. We want to do this.
Well, and the developer would say that they did that, you see, because they went to the elected band council.
But did they? Because here's the thing: they sold the entire plot of land that they're building. However many, I forget how many units they were developing on it, but they sold it basically for the price of one. Like $500,000, which I know. Do the math. Like, clearly, that entire plot of land is worth $500,000. Yet you're selling however many hundreds of units for the same price. It's clearly worth more than that to you. Which is why,
well, I think if you're talking about what I think you're talking about, I mean, it wasn't so much they were buying it as they were paying for a promise that the people of the reserve would not contest it, which was a promise they couldn't actually make, clearly couldn't make given subsequent events. Right. And for anybody listening who's like, well, elected council, they're elected, right? That's democracy. You should realize that those councils were imposed on the First Nations reserves by the Canadian government. It's the whole problem here ultimately is that we always come back to, but this is the law. And what you don't understand is it's like, well, it's not our law. We never said we wanted these laws. And even when things are done by our laws, such as granting 10 miles either side of the Grand River to Joseph Brant and the Haudenosaunee people, we don't then abide by our own laws. There's a fairly low level of respect for how our own justice system is used when the First Nations are involved.
Well, but that's the thing is, I have a feeling that this whole situation could have been avoided if the developer honestly went with open intentions and good faith to the Six Nations people and said to the whole, we would like to develop. How do we do that? And I don't know if I don't know what would happen. I'm not a predictor of the future, but there's something to say, like, you go there with the open arms and said, here's a contract. Either we lease or we buy the land from you for a fair market price. And the First Nations might have said, Okay, that's fair. Like we're not using it. It's the fact that the developers kind of came in and snuck in around and grabbed the land. And I actually get the anger that was involved here, because when the First Nations, when the Six Nations went to the courts to say, look, can we just put a pause on this development? Like, time out, freeze it. Like, we need to sort, if we're going to sort out who owns this land, let's freeze it. Instead, the judge said, no, you have to get off until we sort it out. You have to get off. Also, we're going to just allow the developer to continue building their project. And it's like, that's not right. That's just not right. You can tell the developer, no, sit tight for a while until we sort this out. Now, yeah, that might take 50 years. I don't know how long it'll take. Land claims are backlogged up the wazoo in the court system, mostly because the court system isn't designed to handle this stuff. Like it's not. The federal government needs to step in and say, no, this is First Nations land. This is not.
Well, we're dealing with contract systems that are trying to interpret the implications of belts, wampum belts, and I think that's the right term. And apologies if it isn't. Of conflicting legal systems, conflicting ways of viewing the world that are just so completely alien to each other. And for the last however many 100 years, we've worked on the basis that the first system wasn't actually relevant to anything, and that the system that was placed on top of that is the only one that matters. But we're going to accept these things from a previous way of viewing the world as contracts. Yeah, I mean, as much as anything, the entire situation with the First Nations is about legal systems, and it's about recognition of people as a separate people that we have acknowledged again and again and again, but yet then will refuse to kind of honor in any significant way.
But it goes to wondering, part of it is restarting, I think, a process that we let atrophy, a process of communications between two nations that we let atrophy for centuries and for generations. And that resulted in things like the residential school system, where, we're like, well, we don't have to treat them as equal partners in the land or what have you. And that's where we are now. We can either keep fighting this system that clearly doesn't work, or we can try and rebuild a relationship. And is that possible? I don't know. I'm not saying, yeah, it's going to be easy. We just need to do it. It's going to be hard work. It's going to mean giving up a lot of preconceived notions, a lot of racist notions that we might have, and putting our trust in each other again. That's going to take a huge amount of work. It's not, and I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm not saying that that's going to be easy, and that's going to mean a lot of trust to be earned. And it might mean that, yeah, you go hat in hand to the First Nations people and say, hey, can we build something on this land? My suspicion is a lot of them, the first time, just say no. We've been burned by you so many times in the past. If we have a chance to say no, we're going to say no. I don't care how great it'll be for us. And we have to accept that. We have to accept, yeah, we've burned a lot of bridges here. We've done a lot of wrong, and we have to earn back that trust. And that takes time. That's the only solution, is that it'll just take time to do it, but it has to be done.
And we should draw it to a close here, but I mean, the irony is that the modern state of Canada, does not claim its existence by right of conquest of North America. It claims its existence as the result of a collection of extremely shady deals with people who lived here, by which, a bag of beans or whatever, I'm using a kind of flippant term there, was offered in return for territory. So we bought the land, is our claim, from the First Nations, even though the First Nations had no concept of what they were selling, had no concept, indeed, of the concept of land ownership or sale. So this is how here we are. This is how we are where we are. Ironically, if it was conquest, it's a lot simpler. You ask someone who lives in Wales, what their land rights are, and it's like, well, no, you got beat. Sorry. But we didn't. We bought the lands according to our own arguments. But we didn't buy all of them. There's huge areas that are unceded, that were never given over to us. And we have to recognize all of that. If we're going to claim that we have a legal right to be here, based on those things, then we have to play by the damn rules that we put in, that we said were the rules. Yeah, I mean, so it's going back to first principles and starting over, really. Anyway, that is more than long enough conversation for today, I suspect. Yes. Thanks to anybody who made it to the end. And we'll be back again with our usual Thursday episode, and we'll look forward to speaking again then. Bye for now.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.